Greek mythology is an expansive and enriching subject. Its stories, characters, settings and themes have transcended myth and crept into many facets of the world as we know it today. From place names to constellations, planets and moons in the night sky, and even into our languages, the myths of ancient Greece live on in our day-to-day lives. It has also made its way into popular culture, from series such as Percy Jackson and God of War, to characters and ideas taken from Greek mythology, such as DC's Wonder Woman being an Amazon, a tribe of warrior women found in Greek myth, or the Justice League being compared to or symbolic of the Olympians, the 12 main gods of Greek worship. My aim in this podcast episode is to lay out the basis for Greek mythology, from chaos and the absence of time, to the reign of the first generation of gods and the Titans, to the rise and prosperity of the Olympians and the creation of mortal man. The ancient Greeks are known for their love of all things cultural and artistic. Many whose names are still known today are still renowned for their paintings and sculptures, poetry and philosophies, and their scientific exploits, particularly in the astrological field. It is from this dedication to art and the pursuit of knowledge that the mythology sprang, often in response to making sense of their own history and of the world around them. The name for such stories that attempt to capture a meaning or reason for why things happen, such as seasons in the weather, is etiology. Before we had scientific explanations for why storms and earthquakes occur, or how the sky is separated from the earth, we blamed it on gods that had the power to bend the environment to their will and lift up the sky on their backs. Poets, authors, and playwrights such as Hesiod, Homer, Sophocles, Plato, and many others popularized much of Greek mythology by putting its stories, which had up until then been spread by word of mouth alone, to pen. This gave the mythology a more solidified outline in terms of an order of events and less of a reliance on interpretation. That said, there is still a large amount of variation between different tellings of the same stories by different writers or depictions in artwork. We will look at a few examples of this throughout this introduction to the mythology. But without further ado, let's start from the beginning. Chaos and creation. When I say let's start at the beginning, well, that isn't entirely accurate, because when I say beginning, it implies that time was in motion, that it was the start of something that could therefore have an end. But in truth, our beginning comes before the concept of time itself, in an empty void known as chaos. In Greek mythology, there is little to no separation between a concept like chaos and a shape or form to personify that concept. Whether chaos was a state of being or an entity of some kind, or both, is impossible to tell. The best way to think of it is that these concepts can manifest themselves into any shape if they wish to. From the empty chaos of the universe, two new entities emerged: Erebus, which we would call darkness, and Nyx, night. The two coupled immediately, as time was still unestablished, and therefore everything at this point happened all at once. They birthed Temera, day, and Aether, light. Meanwhile, two more entities emerged from chaos: Gaia, the earth, and Tartarus, the cavernous depths below. Gaia, our Mother Earth, then gave birth on her own to two sons, Pontus the sea and Uranus the sky. We know Uranus better as Uranus, named so by the Romans who adopted much from the Greeks' methods of worship. These first few primal entities, void of personality, individuality, or character, were known as the primordial deities, the first order of divine beings from which everything and everyone else would derive. The moment that Uranus the sky spawned from Gaia, he took his place above her, separating himself from the land that was the earth. 12 new lesser beings emerged from the union of Gaia and Uranus, though lesser is hardly an apt word to describe them, as they would come to be known as the Titans, a giant race of divine beings that would rule over creation for the time being. They were the second order of divinity. Of the 12 Titans to be born of Gaia, the 6 males were Oceanus, Cous, Creus, Hyperion, Iapetus, and Kronos. The other 6, all female, were Theia, Themis, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, Tethys, and Rhea. It is speculated that Kronos, the last of the sons of Gaia, is the same being known as Cronus, a god of time, and therefore his birth was the catalyst for the start of time itself. The characterlessness of the universe dissipated, and life as we know it had begun. The Titans, the Mutants, and Gaia's Revenge. After giving birth to the 12 Titans and Titanesses, Gaia and Uranus, not yet content with the sparsity of life in the universe, gave birth to two sets of triplets, each distinct from anything that had yet come into being. The Cyclopes were a race of one-eyed giants, and the second set of triplets, the Hecatoncheires, were another new race, each sporting 50 heads and 100 arms. Disgusted at the sight of these monstrosities, Uranus the Skyfather pushed his and Gaia's creations back into her womb, banishing them from life. This crime against the cycle of life and against the love of his mother sparked a deep and writhing hatred in Gaia for her son the Sky. She swore that it would not go unpunished. She carved and crafted a half-moon blade from adamantine and hid it in a cleft of the mountain Othrys, a place that was sacred to the divine beings of the time. Looking to her sons and daughters the Titans, she pleaded for aid in enacting a plot of revenge against Uranus. While I won't go into too much detail on each of the Titans here, as doing so would make for too hefty an introduction to the mythology, those of note include Oceanus and Tethys, Titans that ruled over the seas, who coupled and gave birth to many river gods such as Nilus the Nile, and also birthed Metis the Wise, who will go on to play a larger role in the age of the Olympians. Also of note is Mnemosyne, who had the ability to remember anything and everything, giving us our word for mnemonic, an example of the mythology touching our languages today. At last Gaia's search was over as she looked upon her son, Kronos, the only one of her children with the necessary thirst for power to enact revenge upon and dethrone his father Uranus. Kronos was taken to the cleft of Mount Othrys in which his weapon of justice, the sickle crafted by his mother Gaia, lay hidden. He hid in the shadows as his father approached his mother upon the highest point of the mountain for their ritual love-making. Just as Uranus prepared himself to cover Gaia, Kronos stepped from his hiding place, slicing his curved blade through the air, castrating the sky god in one swift motion. To add to his father's shame, he launched the severed testicles over the mountain, through the sky, across the land, and into the sea. As Uranus knelt, bleeding and powerless before his Titan son, he cursed Kronos to one day suffer the same fate as him, for his own offspring to destroy him. Kronos then banished his father to the depths of Tartarus, where he would always remain. His estranged brothers too, whom he freed from Gaia's womb with his sickle, were exiled to the caves beneath the earth. Phallic imagery is often used in this way, throughout the history of storytelling, to convey power, or in this case the loss of power. In the Alien movies, the imagery of xenomorphs not only symbolizes birth, as the facehuggers birth aliens from within the bodies of their victims, but is also used to show the dominion of the species over our own. Rhea, Kronos' curse, and Zeus, king of the gods. With Uranus out of the picture, Kronos was now the ruler of both the land and sky, taking his father's place as leader of all the gods. Rhea, his beloved sister and his queen, gave herself to her brother. She firmly believed in his power and ability to rule the heavens, and looked forward to seeing their sons and daughters growing up happy and healthy, free from the Sky Father's tyranny. It was not to be, however. Uranus' last words to his treacherous son, the curse he had set upon him, played on Kronos' mind as he watched Rhea grow heavy with their first child. When the baby Hestia was born, Kronos lifted her up and swallowed her whole. No child of his could destroy him if they could not grow up to do so. Rhea was of course shocked and appalled at this horrific display, but her steadfast loyalty and devotion to her brother and husband Kronos overwrote any hate that boiled inside her for the devouring of her first and only child. The two soon coupled again, producing a second child, a boy she named Hades. Like the first, and just as suddenly, Kronos took the boy in his Titan hand and ate him up. I'm sure we'll never know quite how Rhea went on after this point. Perhaps she was truly blinded by her admiration for Kronos as a leader of their people, or for a while tried to make herself believe that he was justified in his actions to stop his curse from coming true, but 3 more of her children were taken from her by Kronos before she finally snapped. These 3 were Demeter, a second baby girl, Poseidon, a second boy, and Hera, a third girl. Rhea vowed to stop the monster that her husband Kronos had become, before another of her beloved children was to be eaten. As she became heavy for a 6th time with the child, Rhea devised a plan to trick her husband and stop him from consuming her third baby boy, Zeus. Just days before the birth of the baby, Rhea swaddled a large smooth stone in linen, disguising it as her baby, and on the summit of Mount Othrys she mimicked the sounds of labour. Kronos, hearing her cries and the supposed cries of his newest child, found Rhea there and demanded the baby from her. Without hesitation, and without checking, he gulped down the stone, believing it to be the infant Zeus. After Kronos had been tricked by his wife, Rhea made her way to Mount Ida on Crete, and assisted by the motherly she-goat Amalthea, gave birth to Zeus inside a cave in the mountain. Zeus grew from infancy under the care of Amalthea, and was kept hidden from the all-seeing and hearing Kronos by the constant noise made by the tribes in the area surrounding Mount Ida. However, Rhea decided that the successful ruse to save the baby Zeus wasn't enough. She would enact her revenge on Kronos as her mother Gaia had done to Ouranos, using their youngest child to overthrow his leadership. As Zeus grew into his teen years, his mother introduced him to the Titaness Metis, who we met earlier. Metis was to educate him both in the ways of the world and in the arts of cunning and guile so that he may one day overthrow Kronos. Zeus was immediately attracted to Metis, and over time they developed a love for each other that, one day, would result in their literal union to one another, but we'll get to that later. Once he reached adulthood, Zeus was ready to undertake the task he had long been training and readying himself for. Metis prepared a poison for him and sent him back to his mother Rhea to enact their plan of revenge. Rhea took Zeus to Mount Othrys and presented him to Kronos as a cupbearer. Kronos, taking the drink from his new servant, drank deeply from the cup. Suddenly he became dizzy and his vision blurred. All at once, a choking sensation caused him to spew forth the stone that was used to trick him years ago. Suddenly understanding, but powerless to stop what was about to happen, Kronos then vomited up the other 5 of his 6 children. Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Hades and Hestia. The 5 banded around Zeus, swearing allegiance to their brother, their leader, as they watched Kronos fall, exhausted from the regurgitation of his children, into a deep sleep, the poison taking its full effect. It would be a while before Zeus could truly dethrone his father, however, as the rest of the Titan race would rally against this new generation of gods in a decade-long war, known as the Titanomachy. The Titanomachy. Not much is known about the 10-year war between the Titans and the new gods. What is known is that the Titan Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus rallied to Zeus's side in the war, Prometheus becoming a trusted friend and even like a brother to Zeus. Metis also helped Zeus's cause, advising him to free the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires from their imprisonment in the caves below the earth. The 100 arms and hands of the Hecatoncheires proved invaluable in battle against the Titans, and the Cyclopes with their master craftsmanship and forging skills harnessed the power of lightning into bolts for Zeus to use as weapons. Despite their disadvantage in numbers, Zeus and his army beat the Titans into submission and won the war. It was now time for Zeus to dole out punishments to his greatest enemies during the war. He first sentenced Atlas, who had been his greatest foe in combat, to hold up the sky for the rest of eternity. There are conflicting accounts and interpretations as to what Zeus did about his tyrant father Kronos. Some say that he was banished to live out eternity beside his father Ouranos in the depths of Tartarus. My preferred version, however, is that he was exiled from the heavens, and sent to travel the world without rest, measuring out and counting every passing second of time. This makes more sense to me, as we get our word for chronology from this titan. Now was also time to share out the heavens Zeus had won with his brothers and sisters, and to reward those who helped him in the efforts to win his throne. He made the Cyclopes his personal smiths, and gave the Hecatoncheires the position of guardians to the gates of Tartarus. He allowed the Titans that had fought with him in the war, and those that surrendered to him, free reign over the land, to live in peace under his rule. He gave to his brothers Hades and Poseidon dominion over the underworld and the seas, respectively. Zeus's wedding and the Olympians. Zeus did not, however, wish only to divide his rule between him and his siblings, like his father and grandfather had, believing it to be their greatest mistake. Instead, he envisioned a group of 12 gods, a council that would strengthen communication between the different areas of his rule. They would come to be known as the Olympians, making their home on Mount Olympus. Taking her as his queen, Zeus and his sister Hera headed the Dodecatheon, with 5 gods sitting to each side of them. We have already met Hestia, Demeter and Poseidon, Zeus's other brothers and sisters. Hades is not counted among the Olympians as he was too busy ruling the underworld. More joined their ranks. After the genitals of Uranus were flung into the sea, a beautiful goddess rose from the sea foam that was created, Aphrodite, whose name literally means from the foam. Ares too was now present among the gods of Olympus, second born of Zeus and Hera. For now, however, we will be delaying the meeting of the last four Olympians until after the wedding of the king and queen of the heavens. There was much celebration on Olympus on the day of the wedding between Zeus and Hera. It is a shame then that the groom, who was and will always be set in his promiscuous ways, decided that his wedding day would be a good time to confess his feelings towards Metis, his Titan tutor that had advised him during the war. Metis, having always loved Zeus, consented to him. Now the details of what happened after this are another point of contention, with a number of variations on the story. In my preferred version, however, taken from Stephen Fry's book Mythos, Metis, after her and Zeus's lovemaking, challenges the king of the gods to a game of transformations. Zeus chases her first as a bull, then a bear, and then a lion, before finally catching her as an eagle. Metis then challenges Zeus to catch her again, this time allowing her to take the shape of a fly so that she could be harder to catch. Zeus instantly becomes a lizard and snatches her from the air with his tongue, eating her whole. Satisfied that he had won the challenge, Zeus returned to his wedding feast. The next day, however, Zeus woke up with an unbearable headache. Unbeknownst to him, the crafty Metis, whose plan it was all along for Zeus to catch her this way, was tinkering and forging in his head. The pain was so much that the king of the gods begged Triton, a son of Poseidon, to drown him in the sea. Zeus's council of gods gathered around him, each trying different solutions and cures to no avail. Finally, Prometheus, Zeus's Titan friend, ordered Hephaestus, Zeus's and Hera's firstborn and another Olympian, to craft a weapon great enough to cleave Zeus's head in two, and root out whatever was causing him all this trouble. Hephaestus set to work and returned with a large double-headed great axe, striking his father's head clean in two. As he stepped back, Hephaestus and the rest of Zeus's family and friends looked on in awe as from his open head rose the beautiful warrior goddess Athena. Forgetting about all the trouble Zeus went through to birth this daughter, who he realized must be by Metis, Zeus regarded Athena warmly and welcomed her as the newest Olympian, after, of course, his head sealed and healed itself shut again, as gods so easily do. Metis, who still resided in her lover's head, had in fact given up her freedom to always be with the one she loved. This position gave her the chance to always offer her wise counsel to Zeus, as she had done during the Titanomachy. Whether Zeus was happy with this arrangement or not, we do not know, but I like to think that in his love for Metis, he found a way to accept and understand the reasoning behind her actions. So far, we count Zeus and Hera as the heads of the Olympians. Their siblings, Hestia, Demeter, and Poseidon sit beside them, along with Aphrodite, Ares, Hephaestus, and finally Athena. Only 3 more are needed to make up our dodecatheon. It is good then that Zeus, his wandering eye falling upon the Titaness Leto, was soon to birth twins that would join their ranks. This time, however, Hera would not let Zeus's adultery go unpunished. She begged her grandmother Gaia to curse Leto so that she could not give birth on the earth itself. Leto travelled across the sea, looking to other minor gods and deities in search of somewhere to safely birth her children. Wishing he could help, but unable to do the spell of another god, Zeus asked Poseidon to push Leto's boat in the direction of an island called Delos. This island was separated from the seabed, and so was immune to Hera's curse. On this island, Leto gave birth to the twins, Artemis and Apollo. These 2 gods were known for their love of hunting, and naturally, being children of Zeus, were invited into the fold as Olympians. During the Titanomachy, Atlas, the Titan that was punished to hold up the sky for the rest of eternity, had fathered 7 children, the Pleiades, who were sea nymphs. Zeus, driven as usual by lust, appeared before the eldest, Maia, and had a child with her. Hermes was the name of this child. We know him as the messenger god, and is seen in many stories throughout Greek mythology, usually the middleman in the affairs between mortals and immortals, or between the gods themselves, hence his title. So there we are, all the Olympians in place. Leaving things here would give you a solid basis for any further research you might want to undertake yourself. However, we are not quite finished yet. The creation of man. Since the forming of the dodecatheon, the other gods and immortals on Olympus noticed a change in Zeus. He was less jovial and seemed to keep to himself, acting more thoughtful and inside his own head. Prometheus, Zeus's Titan friend and perhaps his best friend, noticed this more than anyone. One day the two went for a walk together and Zeus spoke his mind. He told Prometheus how, now that the foundations had been laid for creation and everything on the earth had its place, he felt it was also empty. He had the idea to create a new species, formed in the image of the gods themselves, but on a smaller scale and with no power of their own. They could lay claim to any corner of the earth they wished, and could farm and till soil, and build settlements all over. They would be a sort of experiment for the gods, a plaything that worshipped and served them, but that could for the most part think and act for themselves. Prometheus, at first hesitant towards the idea, began to warm to it as Zeus told him that he would be the one to form this new race from the clay of the earth. Prometheus set to work immediately. He took the best consistency of clay he could find, and moulded it into the shapes he desired. He mixed the clay used for the heads in Zeus's own saliva, so that life may be breathed into their forms. These figures, formed of Gaia's clay, held together by saliva belonging to the king of the gods, were then left to bake by the light of Helios, the sun god. The last step was to bring these perfect creations to life. Zeus brought Athena to the spot where he had left Prometheus earlier that day. The goddess of war and wisdom breathed into each of the small figures, and slowly they came to life, coughing and gasping as if newborn, yet fully formed as adults. They tested their eyes and other senses. Before long they were taking their first steps and getting used to the environment that surrounded them. These anthropos, that which is below, or humans as they were named, began bowing to their gods. Prometheus, intending more to befriend his creations than become idolized by them, reduced himself to their size, promising to live with them and teach them how to live off the land, how to craft and forge, and how to cook. At the idea of this, Zeus went into a rage. He exclaimed that these humans should never be given the knowledge or power to harness fire, lest they begin to challenge the gods. Calming from his outburst, Zeus clapped his hands together, and the small row of humans of different colours, shapes and sizes grew into a mass of a few 100,000. The human race was here, and they were free to walk the land. The Golden Age and Prometheus's gift. It was a prosperous time for the race of man. The gods kept the land fertile, taught them craft and artistry, how to farm and how to hunt wild game. There were no wars, no poverty. However, as a single-sex species for now, only consisting of males, they were also incapable of many things we know the human race for. They had no passion, no forward drive beyond their own survival, and their love was for their gods only. Prometheus, who with his brother Epimetheus had taken to living and spending time with his human creations more than his own kind, grew more and more fond of the creatures. As he did so, he decided there was something missing. What the human race needed was fire. For fire is not only a tool, but it is the inner fire, the human drive to be successful, to find reason, to make sense of the world and to guide our emotions. Despite his best friend's warning, Prometheus knew his work would never be complete unless he stole fire for us. He climbed up Olympus, being careful not to be seen by the other gods, and made his way to Hephaestus' forge. Brontes, one of the Cyclopes that assisted Hephaestus, lay sleeping before the fire. Carefully, Prometheus picked the stalk of a plant that grew near the forge, and set it alight in the raging hot furnace. He quickly made his descent back down to Earth, and to the settlement that he and his brother now called home. He showed the humans there how to cook, how to forge, and many other uses for this new and exciting tool. This was divine fire, and it inspired in humans many emotions they had not felt before. Prometheus travelled from settlement to settlement, teaching the humans all he could and inspiring each one with his gift of fire. However, Prometheus had disobeyed Zeus, his closest friend besides the humans, and he would pay for what Zeus believed to be his treachery. Pandora's Box. This next story is one that has remained popular throughout the years and isn't always told in the context of Greek mythology, but rather as a way to teach through the morals presented in the story. As Zeus pondered upon what method of punishment would most befit Prometheus for betraying him, Metis, the wise titaness that now counselled him from inside of his head, whispered to him a plan that would not only teach Prometheus a lesson, but also the humans he had betrayed him in favour of. Zeus ordered Hephaestus to create a figure in the same way that Prometheus had done when designing the first men. This human, however, was to be a young female, the first and only of her kind. Hephaestus modelled her in the image of his wife, Aphrodite, as well as his mother Hera, his aunt Demeter, and his sister Athena. Given a gift from each of the gods on Olympus, this beautiful young woman was taught skills and crafts of all kind, and was given beautiful sequined dresses and items of jewellery. She was named Pandora, all gifted by Hermes. Her last gift, given to her by Zeus himself, was a sealed clay jar filled with, well, that's a secret, Zeus told her. She was never to open it. Hermes brought Pandora to the house of Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus. Prometheus was still travelling the lands, from village to village, giving the gift of fire to the mortal men. While he was away, Epimetheus was under strict instruction to stay out of the affairs of the other gods, knowing that his punishment was due. One day, however, Epimetheus heard a knock at his door. He opened it to find the most beautiful creature he had ever laid his eyes upon, Pandora. The two were quickly wed, having fallen in love at first sight, and with the concern that Prometheus would not have approved the marriage were he present. They were very happy together, however the jar of secrets still played on Pandora's mind every day. It sat on a shelf in their room, and as she would go about her daily chores, she would find her gaze drawn to it with increasing frequency and intensity. It was only a matter of time before she would be unable to resist a peek at its contents. When the problem had become almost beyond her control, Pandora, in a desperate attempt to remove the burden from her mind, took the jar in the dead of night and dug a deep hole in the ground, where she buried it, out of sight and therefore, hopefully, out of mind. A week passed and the jar had almost completely been wiped from her mind. One day, however, she found herself unable to sleep. From her position in the bed she shared with her husband Epimetheus, she could see freely out the bedroom window. The moonlight was intense this night, lighting the whole of their garden in a ghostly silver glow. The jar invaded Pandora's mind again. Quickly she made her way into the garden, and on her hands and knees began frantically digging at the dirt before her. Finally she held the jar again. Slowly she twisted the lid, undoing the wax seal that held it shut. The moment she lifted the lid, 1,000 ghastly and horrifying creatures flew out and swarmed around the poor woman. These creatures were the embodiment of all that is wrong with the world. Hardship, starvation, pain, anarchy, lies, quarrels, disputes, wars, battles, manslaughter, illness, misery, and want flew away suddenly in every direction, making their home anywhere that man had habitation. Pandora slammed the lid of the jar shut. The only creature that remained was hope. I like to think that the very human woman Pandora was given the jar as a sort of test for mankind. If she could resist its temptations, man would not be punished for Prometheus's wrongdoing. However, her inability to push aside the human values of curiosity and the seeking of knowledge led to the entirety of our race being punished for holding those same values. After all, with knowledge comes power, and it is power that Zeus did not want man to have, the ability to rise up against their gods and become the next order. Many questions have been raised as to the meaning behind hope having its place within the jar of evil. Some suggest that hope, while usually a good thing, a guiding and driving force, is easily corruptible. That those who rely too heavily on hope are more open to manipulation. It could also be said that hope and similar emotions and feelings such as aspiration and longing is what breeds much of the evils that flew from the jar. Pain, misery and want can all be found when our hopes and dreams come crashing down. Others believe that hope remaining in the jar means that it is protected, that the human species gets to keep and have hope. My favourite interpretation, however, comes from Sarah Oliver in an episode of a podcast she shares with her co-host Paul Bianchi, Mythunderstood.
What does this outcome mean to you?
Yeah, it seems like all of those other things are flying through the air, then hope, since it wasn't released with it, is something you have to find on your own then.
Prometheus's punishment. With the opening of the jar, the world spun into madness. The first murders were committed. People became greedy, and their greed caused starvation. Plagues and other illnesses ran amok. The Golden Age drew to a close as Zeus's punishment to man was dealt. His work was not done, however. Yes, Prometheus had to watch his precious race of mortals descend into beings lesser than they had been since their creation. But Prometheus himself had not yet felt the pain and humiliation that Zeus had felt at his betrayal. Willingly surrendering to his old friend, ready to face whatever torture would be cast upon him, Prometheus gave himself up to Zeus. He was bound and chained to a large boulder, stretched naked across its rough surface. Two eagles, the symbol of Zeus, which as pointed out by Rick Riordan in his Percy Jackson series, can still be found today as a symbol of high status and power in the iconography of the US government, swooped down and tore at the flesh of his stomach and chest, ripping out his liver and other vital organs. This was to be his punishment for the rest of forever. As a god, his body would regenerate quickly, his flesh new and healthy, but the pain too would be fresh each day. Prometheus had conceded to his fate, but he told Zeus that he regretted nothing, that he would do what he did again for his beloved human species. At this remark, Zeus turned the eagles into hungry, ugly vultures, and left the Titan to his fate. Some have called Prometheus the Jesus of Greek mythology, for the sacrifices he made for us. Though his punishment was to last an eternity, he was later freed by Heracles, the original Greek name for the hero of man we know more commonly now as Hercules. They would later team up along with the Olympians to fight in the Gigantomachy, the War of the Giants, but that is a story for another time. The foundations have been laid, the stage set. We have seen the creation of the universe, the earth and the sky. We have seen primordial beings and their descendants establishing their power and dominions over the earth. The Olympians have made their home in the heavens, and our race moulded from clay in their image, and a portrayal that shaped the human race to hold all the good and bad that we see today. It is true that behind the grandeur of the names present in these stories, the all-powerful Zeus, the king of the underworld Hades, etc., many of these stories follow patterns and rhythms that we see in the most basic of stories today. Betrayal, temptation, good versus evil, and the powerful versus the less powerful. These are concepts we can find in a Disney movie and novels for young readers. But they are also powerful concepts that leave us thinking about the world around us. Not just thoughts such as, does that mean the lightning bolt that struck my house and left me without internet was Zeus's fault? But deeper thoughts like, would we be the same people we are today had we not been punished with war and illness and malice? Does that darkness have to exist in order for hope and happiness to be present? Was the golden age of man really such a utopia, or were we so ignorant and undeveloped at the time that everything appeared to be perfect? Though these may be age-old stories, and even older ideas, they will always be relevant. It is with that in mind that I encourage you to look further into Greek mythology, as well as other cultural myths and legends, to see what similarities might be found, and how the same ideas can be worked into any story. If you're looking for a place to continue from here, I highly recommend the podcast I mentioned earlier, Myth Understood, for its light-hearted discussion-based storytelling, and Stephen Fry's Mythos series, from which I drew most of the inspiration and interpretation of events for my script. I hope you'll be gripped by the same curiosity and fascination that made me want to do research and create a piece of work like this, and will continue to explore these stories at your leisure. Perhaps the same curiosity that gripped poor Pandora. Will you open your jar?